Hey everybody, know it's been a bit, but we're back here with a little bonus episode we recorded about a month back after our previous episode. I went up and got married, yay! But that just means that we will probably be a little bit till we have a new episode, so we have this little bonus episode to hold you guys over. It was a fun, quick talk about a game we didn't especially like, but it turned into a more interesting conversation after that. So yeah, take a listen, stick around. It's a fun episode. All right, see you guys in a bit. Hello, everyone. This is our Alice Madness Returns Big Bandit Plays bonus episode.
Whoa.
We hated the game so much that we put it as a bonus episode.
Troy thinks that I was a goth in high school. I was not.
Right, he's probably right.
I was not.
Hey, you dyed your hair that one time. Remember?
I dyed my hair because I was cast in my brother's movie.
So before we start, Josh, fill us in. I think you were the only one that played this game beforehand. I want to hear what you thought of this game. Well, it's interesting. I want to know what you thought of it back then and what you thought of it just before you played it, and then we'll talk about our current playthrough.
Okay, fine. Alice Madness Returns is a sequel to a game that I never played before. American McGee's Alice, is that what it's called? I don't know.
Yes.
Some dude, some weird guy who's really into Alice from Wonderland, and he likes to put a dark twist on it artistically. I believe some news came out recently that he's like not doing it anymore because he's a big baby about EA not publishing it or whatever.
I did hear that, yeah.
Yeah, he's like quitting on it forever. I'm like, okay, nobody really cares. This game was good at some point. I don't know how long ago that was. It was at least whenever I played it on the Xbox 360. Back in, I don't even know. It's aged poorly. It's a 3D platformer. It is trying to be like kind of edgy, dark. Has a very unsettling story if you dive into it. So I enjoyed it whenever I first played it. I liked how you could kind of platform jump around. It felt smooth enough. It wasn't perfect, but at that point I was really into kind of lower budget games because those were usually the ones that went on sale and I could afford to buy in high school, to be honest. Yeah, I played it right around the same time. I think maybe a little after I played Darksiders for the first time on Xbox 360. And it was kind of like, okay, this is like a weird. I like Alice in Wonderland. This is weird and edgy, and yeah, I was a high schooler. Give me a break, Troy. But how did you guys feel now about the way it handles, the way it the game feels?
Oh, okay. Before we go in, my first warning flag. My first warning flag was looking at the reviews at the time. And you got to think, this is like the 360, like platformers were still like kind of in their B tier era, and they were like 3D platformers, a lot of them in that console generation. And so when I started seeing like 6 and 7s from reviews back then, I was like, oh God, like the bar has been raised so much higher since then.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh. And so first thing that struck me, I honestly, I will say something good about the game. Okay, I do kind of like what it's doing with its environmental, like design, like the artwork and stuff. It kind of has. Okay. It's kind of a mix of it being an Unreal Engine 3 game and them all having that weird painterly background looking thing, you know. But I also did like the use of color in that first area, and I actually thought there was some cool environmental design for sure.
I agree.
I agree. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, no. If you have something to say about that, because I'm about to dig in. Here we go.
Oh yeah.
Wait. After Izayah, let me say something before.
Sure. Okay. I also played the game like when I was a kid. I didn't get to finish it fully, but I did get far enough to where I was like, this game is really eerie and cool, but at the same time, I wasn't as like glued to my screen for it, you know. But I did think Alice in Return to Madness was an interesting concept of a game that felt like that one book series called, what was it? It's similar concept where they take a.
Oh yeah,
old
it was
story-
it was like Wizard of Oz, how like
Yep.
how they go back to Oz, and turns out that Dorothy, like, she went back and she's queen now, but she's like horrible and she murders people, and so like there's like a new protagonist and their goal is to kill Dorothy.
I like that concept. I like that concept of putting a dark twist on it, and I liked it as a kid. I liked the designs, the arts, and it was clearly art style over graphic fidelity, and I was there for the ride entirely, even with its weird psychotic story. I was still like interested as a kid. As an adult who only barely got through like the first chapter, I just didn't think that it was worth fully my time, despite being short. Because yes, there's a lot to appreciate with this game, but I just didn't feel that engaged enough to like get through it. But
Well,
I still think the way it controlled was pretty neat. But I don't want to get into that yet.
yeah. So all I was gonna say was
Go ahead.
how like we all said we were gonna play this game
Yes.
for our game club. To be clear to the listeners, like we wanted to do it, and then half of us looked at the game and almost vomited instantaneously. How far did you guys get?
I got past the third area, the underwater area, and that's about where I thought this game should end lengthwise.
Okay. Okay. Fair. Izayah,
First chapter. That's it.
first chapter done. Okay.
Oh, wow.
In and out. Yeah. And
Towards the
I
fourth.
personally, I got to the beginning of the third chapter, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember this. I didn't like this that much. So I stopped.
Oh wait, that area specifically?
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is kind of where I was like, okay, come on, I want to get to
Which
the next.
area was that? Which area was that?
The water area.
Right?
Yeah, the water one.
Okay.
was bad, I think.
Yeah.
Was that the third area? Or was
Yeah.
that the second?
No, I think that was a. Oh
Man, I'm
hold
getting
on,
them all
wait.
mixed
No,
up.
no.
now.
The first area is like the garden, like very Alice in Wonderland area. The
Uh-huh.
second one was
Yeah.
like the was it the
Okay,
the
but
rat
no.
dude?
Sorry, the intro though is very short. It doesn't really count as an area. So I guess I was only in the second area and I quit.
Oh my god.
Okay.
Yeah.
Colton, I think you.
I got to chapter 5.
What a
You
man.
actually got past. You
Yeah.
actually got past chapter
No.
4.
Well, no, chapter 5, I think, is where that game-breaking bug.
Oh.
So, I actually got pretty close to the end, and then
That's impressive, dude.
something happened where I had to progress to the rest of the chapter. A certain trigger had to be pulled, and it wasn't, and I don't know. Yeah,
I actually experienced that in the first chapter too, where I had to throw a bomb, and the bomb wasn't responding, so I had to start over completely. But also, I had Windows Firewall on, so what happened was I had to.
Did it think it was a virus?
So it takes everything as a virus. If it's from the internet, if it's from like a download, it's a virus regardless. So what happens is you have to manually enable connection to your desktop with that file, with that program. So that includes games. That includes games with like replays. That includes all of that. So I didn't do that for Alice in Wonderland, and I had to replay the entirety of chapter 1.
Yes. Okay, so what I will say is let's just dig a little more in. Initially, I was with you on the movement. I was like, oh, you know what? This floaty kind of jump actually feels like okay. I'm like, oh man, I could. And it took me like a chapter to realize, like, oh my god, the reason this jump is like this because there's no way this game would have been playable otherwise. Like the platforms don't seem like they're there for a reason. They just seem like they're there to get you to the next point, and they were just like, maybe the developers originally had like a double jump, and they're like, oh my god, this doesn't feel good to like drop, like miss your jump the 8th time. Like, what if we just made her jump forever, and you didn't even have to worry about it? What if we just made the platforming so brainless and dumb that you don't have to worry about it? And that's what it was, dude. Because with those mechanics, it means they don't have to like smartly build out like a path for like platforming, like a Mario. Like there's clearly a path that you see and you're like, okay, that was a fun challenge. With this, it's really not that. It's like, okay, I see the next platform I'm supposed to get to,
Right.
It's there, and
You
now
just
I'm
do
getting to it.
Yeah.
Actually,
know?
for the most part, you don't see the platform you're going to. Like
Oh,
everything was
that's a good
invisible.
point. Well, those are like the secret
Uh,
paths. Like if you want to go get the little extras and everything.
Yeah,
For the
yeah,
most
yeah.
part.
No, I don't know for a lot.
For the
a lot.
most part.
Okay, yeah, okay.
I'm gonna keep yelling over you.
I get it.
Hey, a side tangent real quick. I think it's funny. What was it? Texas Roadhouse. We talked about mediocre games and how I typically like them. For example, Sonic. And one of the games that came up was
Oh, you
Epic
like
Mickey.
mediocre stories? No, I'm kidding.
Epic Mickey.
Hey, watch where you're stepping, buddy. Watch where you're stepping. You do this all the time. But hey, Epic Mickey was one of those games that like Alice in Wonderland 2 or Alice in Return to Madness. Sorry.
This is a good comparison. I didn't think
Yeah. Like these are both games that are like mediocre in reality. But when you're a kid, you're playing them. You're like, these are pretty cool. Like Epic Mickey.
a
I'm curious.
teenager.
I'm curious as an adult if I went back to that Wii game, which I definitely do have. I think the sequel itself, not the first one. I would like to see if I have another Alice in Return to Madness moment. You know what I'm saying?
Imagine
dude.
you would, dude. I would imagine you would.
Epic Mickey, Next Game Club, Epic
Oh,
Mickey.
We all
Please.
play our Wiis.
I played the demo of Epic Mickey 2 on like my PS3, and I was like, oh.
It's
and that was 15 years ago. All right. Yeah. So yeah, and I think so there's that platforming, which obviously, and then there's the combat itself, and I could forgive a lot of the platforming if the combat encounters were like engaging. But
yeah, they're kind of awful.
They're kind of one button mash fests, and
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And the way you lock onto enemies, it doesn't feel right. Like it's really hard to like do crowd management.
I agree with you on that one. Crowd management is very difficult in this game.
But you don't like the pepper grinder?
No,
Grinder.
I hate.
I love it.
What's the eyeball one in the first chapter? What's that eyeball one? Like it's like a teapot, I think.
Well,
like it smacks its head down. Yeah,
you do get like a little bit of like a parry, but the parry feels like situational, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's very weird. And I was wondering, Colton and Josh, I guess, yeah, I guess.
Do a poof and turn a butterfly.
I hate the dodge.
Yeah, that's right.
I love the dodge. That's my favorite element.
I think it looks cool. It just doesn't work well for me. I don't think I made it work well enough to where it's like near automata dodging or like Bayonetta dodging.
Oh, you start really using it in like chapter 4. That was like the Asian aesthetic chapter. You start fighting enemies that are like, I don't know, they're like samurai, like grasshoppers or something, and
that's cool.
And they start like attacking a lot faster than the other enemies, so you actually have to start utilizing that dodge like crazy in chapter 4.
Was that more frustrating, or did that feel more like?
I actually thought combat was best in chapter 4. It was because I actually had to use like everything in my disposal to beat like the waves that they were bringing at me.
Okay,
that's cool.
Okay. Was there more mechanics past that? Because the last thing I got was that like kind of parry.
Did they
introduce anything else?
There was a big hammer weapon thing. I think they introduced. I think they did that in chapter 3.
I think it's in chapter 2.
Oh right, the hobby horse. Yes.
Oh okay.
Just the hammer. Right.
Okay, maybe I didn't like level that thing up at all until chapter 4. Until I was done leveling up my knife thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
man, can I talk about how janky the menus feel and look?
Oh yeah.
Like they look like they kind of look like a Flash game that was like passing as a menu, you know? Yeah. So in the leveling up structure is weird because it's not like what you would normally see even in games back then, like skill trees. Like God of War on PS2 was doing stuff that was like a little more complicated than that, you know? Like filling meters or anything. It's just like, hey, this is how much currency you need. Good. You are now level 2, but it doesn't say like, okay, your damage went from this to this. Does it give a number on the damage numbers, or does it just say it's leveled up?
No, I don't think it gave damage numbers. I think with the sword especially, or the knife, whatever it was, I thought it was interesting that every time you leveled it up, it added a swing to your combo. So like when you button mash, like I think when you start the game, you just swish, and that's all you can do. And then you level up again and you start doing it more. And I think the very last upgrade, I think it added like 2 swings to it. So I thought that was an interesting way to like level up. I mean, it leveled up the damage for sure. You could tell that it leveled up the damage of the weapon, but it also gave you more chances to swing, as a combo.
That reminds
So
me of,
in
Kingdom
chapter
Hearts.
5, I was like at one enemy, I could like take any one enemy down with like I'd hit the button a bunch and she would swing like 8 times.
The more Colton talks about experience and like the way the levels start like like changing it up and whatnot, it does make you want to come back to this game. And I want to say just like I don't hate Alice.
No. On paper, it sounds good, but
Yeah.
the act, it's all about the act of playing and something, and there's nothing that game could do to make just the act of swinging or platforming. Just like everything kind of feels floaty and doesn't hit hard. It's just like nothing in that game was ever satisfying in any way, shape, or form to me.
I will say
I don't know.
my favorite thing of the game were kind of few and far between. It was kind of the cutscenes in between the chapters. I thought,
those kind of a cool style, huh?
Yeah, like I liked the way they looked, and I kind of liked the I liked the aesthetic of the story. It was all about like she was in a mental institution because her family home burned down and killed her family, and everyone thinks that she did it, but she's telling everyone like, no, I didn't do it. She was like, no, I there'd be like the doctor and she one of the story cutscenes you would see the doctor be like, oh, she went upstairs and she locked her sister's bedroom door, and then she went to go set the house on fire. That's why her sister didn't get out of the room. And then like later in the chapter, another like cutscene would happen. She's like, wait a minute, I remember that night. Like I went to go check on my sister before bed, and the door was ajar. It was like wide open, and she, stuff like that. So she's like trying to figure out who actually killed her family.
Yeah,
and it was like weirdly dark,
Like
and
unlocking her own memories, sort of deal.
Yeah, pretty much. So actually, that was my favorite part of the game.
That was a cool
was
premise.
the little story part.
That's what intrigued me the most. Like, yes, it was actually the
so
story.
much like mediocre gameplay in between.
Dude, there's so well. It's not the fact that it's mediocre. It's just that the game is so padded, like so padded. Like I wouldn't be nearly as harsh on the game if it was like a 6 to 8 hour game. Even then, I'd be like, whoa, that was rough to get through. But for it to be like, I don't know what your playtime was, Colton, but for me seeing like how long to beat, to see that it was like,
I'm terrified.
Oh, dude, it was like a 15. It was like it says like 15 hours or something. Or I forget what the exact number is, but it's like way too long. I think we all had the same feeling when we beat that first chapter, and it was like first. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
First out of what? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? A lot of it is it's a game of its time. People really don't make B games like this. Like these games were like a dime a dozen a lot of times, where they were like, hey, this is like I think Dante's Inferno maybe would have even been a better experience, but like a lot of those kind of like clones came after God of War, and all of them were kind of this quality,
Hey,
like, I'd say Darksiders. No, I wouldn't put Darksiders in the same lane as this game. Darksiders is a much better game.
Yeah.
Like I said, if this game was like a 7 back then, it's like, dude, it's like a 4. Like, it's like a 3 to 4. Like these days, which even if you're giving it like a lot of slack, it's just like, man, I even back in the day, I think 7 is pretty generous, but that's looking back, not to say there wasn't anything bad about it. But again, Josh, it's funny you mentioned that story where the creator has beef with EA, because I forget where I was reading it. I think it was like Reset Era, or maybe like YouTube. It's probably YouTube, and a lot of like the comments were like, "Oh my god, screw EA!" Like blah 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 blah. And I looked at it, I'm like, dude, like I'm gonna side with EA on this one.
Yeah,
it obviously didn't hit sales or whatever, but as someone in EA who has this property and plays like 5 seconds of it, they'd be like, yeah, no, like we just put out Dead Space, like we're good.
It's fine.
there was a funny moment. I don't remember which chapter it was, but there was a one of the characters was like trying to put on a theater production, and
Yeah.
they needed you to like convince these other fish to like join, so they have like performers so they can put on the production. And you spend like the next like hour and a half doing that. And if I remember correctly, instead of like putting on a production, they filled the place like up with like other like fish people to like watch it. And then I think it was just all a ploy just to get all the fish in one place so the guy could eat them.
Yep.
Or something. And I was like, what the heck am I playing right now? This is so weird.
I gotta say, all the character models are like super gross and off-putting. I kind of enjoyed that. I was just like, I don't want to talk to any of these people.
This is what British people really look like. Wow.
And I can't tell if the audio direction on like the VO and stuff is meant to be like weird and hard to understand and off-putting, or if that was just like a part of its like budget quality. I'm like, it's probably like a little bit of A, a little bit of B.
Yeah.
You know? It's just like, what are these people saying? And why does the audio sound so weird and weirdly mixed? And I like I said, if that's the direction they're going, then I'm like, oh, interesting. If not, I'm like, okay, still interesting. You know? But yeah, it's just totally one of those games I would have played like 20 minutes of a demo. You know, that's back when we were downloading demos on PS3 and 360 a lot, you know, as a kid. It's just like one of those things I probably would have played 20 minutes of and been like, you know?
I mean, you basically did that.
I pretty much did that now. It's the same thing I did with Epic Mickey. It's the same thing I did with El Shaddai. It's the same thing I did with Dante's Inferno. Like, all those, dude, are all clumped into my head. And I was just like, man, am I really going to put 15 to 18 when I have, like, you know, it also is just like, I didn't have a lot of time to spare either, you know? If I have like maybe say at best 5 hours a week to put into games, like well, it's like, man, I'm gonna have to make a really hard decision for this podcast. And then once I heard Colton, I was almost gonna scrap the entire segment. And then I heard Colton played like the entire thing. I was like, oh man, I can't do that to him. I can't do that to him. And I thought about it. I thought about it again. I'm like, this will at least be an interesting discussion. So yeah. What about you, Josh? I mean, anything about it surprise you when you came back to it, or our reaction to it, or it's just like, oh no, this all works out?
I mean, yeah, immediately your reaction, I was like, what's happening? Like, because I hadn't started like really playing it much yet.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I'll start soon. And then I did, and I was like, God dang it, they were right. This is awful. Yeah, it's funny because it plays exactly how I remember it, but now, because of all the games I've played since, it's just like, oh, I hate this. I hate the way this feels in my hands. But you know, when I played it, it was like, oh, this is unique and interesting, and it's got a cool dark story. And now none of that rang true, which is unfortunate.
Josh, how old are you, Ian?
I am 27.
Okay. Because around the PS3 and 360 era, we were a little bit different ages, but like a generation ago, when I was playing like Dreamcast games, like I would just play the most garbage games, and I wouldn't think like, oh, this is garbage. I'd just be like, oh, you know, this is really difficult, you know?
Right,
and I just continued playing a game that I never even got past the second level because it was just like that bad. Like I think of like playing KO the Kangaroo on like Dreamcast or whatever, or like Super Magnetic Neo, and those are just bad platformers. But back then I just was like, I bought it. I guess I'll play it. I have a feeling that might be where your head is at too, you know?
I think I would have been like a freshman or a sophomore in high school.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I think I was willing to try different things. I didn't know what I really enjoyed that much.
I want to ask you guys a question, okay? Because there's a certain point, I remember specifically a certain point where I like played a bad, like, you know, like a bad, what do you call it? Like adaptation, like game or whatever. And I played a ton of those kids, but the first time it clicked in my head that I was playing a bad game and I did not want to play a bad game, sort of thing. And for me, it was Transformers, the movie on like PS2, and my brother was playing through it, and I played it. I'm like, wait, I don't need to play this. There are better games now. I know there's better games. I played them, and like everything changed for me after that.
Is your gamer conscience coming alive at that point?
Dude, it was before like I ever looked at websites or
like you're
read
awakening.
reviews. Yeah, like it was the first time in my head that I legitimately was like, this game sucks. You know? Did you guys, like, when was that moment for you guys?
Resident Evil
if
4
ever.
was in my Steam library, and I haven't played it yet, so I just
Like, yeah, I know, but as a kid, you're willing to play a lot more garbage.
No, yeah, absolutely.
You know?
That's a good question.
It is a good question because I just think it just happened. Like I was playing it, I replayed an entire section of the first chapter again, and then got back to that point, and I was just like,
Yeah.
do I need to go more?
Okay. I was just wondering if there was like a specific game or time
Mm.
period, because for me it was like
I'm
my
trying to
8th grade
think.
year.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are we trying to have another Troy moment where our gamer conscious came alive?
Yeah. I'm just asking, like, what was the first game you played and we're like, I don't need to play this. This is actually a active waste of my gamer time.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Dude, that's difficult. I'll have to pull up my entire. Wait a minute.
I'm scrolling through Xbox 360 games to just get a rough idea of like.
PlayStation.
You're gonna see something that says like
library.
1%.
Oh man.
It's definitely one of the PlayStation games. I know it.
I know my next moment after that where I became really picky choosy and didn't just play a game because it was AAA, and that was Watch Dogs. Was that for me? I think I said that on the podcast. I said that on the podcast before.
I platinumed that game. I played that like drinking game or whatever. Like
I should have done that. LA Noire was another one that I shouldn't have ever played all the way through. I did not like that game, but I bought it for $50 and I was going to play through it. All right, cool. Oh, if no one knows, I was just wondering. I don't know.
I really wish I knew. I'm sure I had that moment too. I really wish I could think of it though.
I mean, for some people, yeah.
It was probably like freaking. I was joking about Lost Planet earlier, but I remember the first time I played it, I was like, "Man, this is bad," but I want to see where this goes. And I was not able to push through, so that might be the first moment where I was like,
"Okay."
Oh, you know what? You know what? I think I'm.
No.
Holy shit! Okay, there's multiple games, but I feel like the one game that really burned me, it was our first episode, Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach.
Oh,
I looked at that game, and I looked at how you get the true ending, and I was like, this is utter bullshit. This is not the Five Nights at Freddy's I grew up loving. I'm out. I'm done. Yeah. I'm freaking done. I can't. No, I'm gonna start looking at critics' reviews. I'm gonna start looking at all this shit. You are the last straw. I never went back to the whole DLC plan for it. I'll give it a try. I'll talk about it on the pod. I'll 100% talk about the pod. But middle finger to that game. I am pissed at you. Oh my god. I can go on a rant on how much I hate that game.
Well, there you go. You found it. I don't know if I actively hated it.
Twisted Metal PS3. That's mine.
Oh,
really?
I don't know if that's the first one, but I remember that day I was so excited because I loved Twisted Metal growing up, and I got it and I started playing it, and I was like, wow, I really don't have to keep playing this, do I? No one's telling me to keep playing this. I can stop now. And then I stopped.
Yeah, I think this podcast...
that's hilarious. I played the beta for that and never bought it. I played it for like an hour and was like, okay.
This podcast has really developed me in a way that my gamer tastes are refined. Just kidding. I still like Sonic Unleashed.
And then Colton went straight from Twisted Metal to also David Jaffe's Drawn to Death and was like, this is my name. Here we go.
Yeah. That game was...
David Jaffe's had a kind of a rough run on games of the last decade for sure.
I realized what that name meant.
That still had a really interesting... I had an interesting, I guess, thing that happened to me in that game, though, that I actually didn't hate. It was
right. I remember you telling us this.
Yeah, I thought that little multiplayer thing. I've never seen something like that in a multiplaire game before.
Have you shared that on the pod? Have you?
I don't remember.
I don't think you have.
So just in case if I didn't, I was playing
bonus episode.
It was like it was the 2v2 mode. So I loaded in a match, and it kind of pulls you into the lobby where you see your teammate and you see the other two people against you as the map is loading. And then right before the map loads all the way, I see my teammate leaves. And then it doesn't kick me out of the lobby or anything. It just keeps loading the map. And as the map starts, it doesn't start right away. They have this extra thing that happens. And it was like the super edgy like announcer guy that was in the game.
Oh,
It was
God,
super
the dialogue
cringy.
in that game's super
Yeah.
bad.
He the announcer started talking. He was like, wait, before we get started. He was like, well, it looks like your teammate left you, didn't he? Well, that's kind of a jerk move. And then he's like, hey, I don't want to see any smirking from you, the other team over there. He said, you know what, let me even things out. Mr. Solo, all your damage gets you output double the damage. How about that? Does that make it even? Everybody good? All right, cool, fight. And then the game started. And I was like, whoa! And it was actually like an even match throughout like the rest of the match. And I thought that was really interesting. And I've never really seen that in a game yet.
What was that? What was it?
Yeah, that's crazy. It's called Drawn to Death. It was David Jaffe's last game, and it is otherwise a pretty bad game.
Yeah. The rest of it was pretty bad.
I will say,
but the Borderlands 3 team was like, this dialogue. What if we just made an entire game?
Oh yeah.
Security Breach made me realize how I should really take notice of how developers just like overall like be game sense aware, be completely aware of who you're buying it from, what's the history look like, everything like that. Security Breach really woke me up, and like this podcast overall has really developed me in that way that now I'm just doing legitimate research on games before I even like draw them into the Fantasy Critic. But the one game I feel like as a kid, like just like growing up, but I knew I don't have to play these games, even though they're free. It was Don't Bite Me Bro for the PS4. This is my first game on PS4, and I'm like, I don't have money. I don't. It's like a snake game, I think. It's like a snake game or like or whatever. And like I was like, I downloaded it for free. Don't have money, of course. So I was like, okay, it's whatever. So I got it, and I was just like, this game, it exists. I will delete it. And then I went back to playing, let's see, Life is Strange, Journey, and Gravity Rush. That's what I was playing at the time.
Yeah, and I think Izayah, you started gaming in a very interesting time because a lot of that I think I've said this on the pod before. Like a lot of that shovelware and nonsense that happened went away. Because there was a lot of things as kids that we liked, like a lot of properties we liked, and we bought the game because of that property. And it was pretty much garbage. Like that's what superhero games were for like a very long time.
Oh yeah.
Even in the PS3 era, like in our game show one, we talked about Captain America and stuff.
Spider-Man
like all
2.
those games are bad, man. Spider-Man 2 was like the shining example for
Yeah.
years until like Arkham Asylum came out, and then that became like the game till the next Spider-Man game came out, the next good one. Which again, it took like them another 12 Spider-Man games to get another like amazing one out of it. So yeah. But all right, guys. Well, I won't hold you too much longer because this bonus pod is on the end of our last pod. Hi, little inside baseball. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Josh. Thank you for your insights. Josh, give a public apology to everyone on this podcast, one by one by name.
I hope your ideas are better.
I wanted to play Dishonored 2.
I have it downloaded.
Wait, I thought it was the first one.
Yeah, I have the first one.
Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, you're right.
It's the first one.
Right,
it's the first one. We will do another one of these. We will make sure we'll plan out our games. I still think this was an interesting conversation, and it was well worth my 3 hours. Maybe not well worth Colton's 15 hours, but
yeah.
Oh man, I'd love to see your playtime on that, Colton. Just maybe you don't want to know, but
I wish we had your play. I wish we could see your playthrough. I would like watching that.
Oh my gosh, dude! I thought
maybe
about it.
At like 5x speed. Maybe.
Yeah, dude. I was thinking about it. It's like, well, if I can't play it, maybe I'll watch it. But then I'm like, oh man, what's worse than playing this game? It's probably watching it.
Probably.
So yeah. I agree. If you can get like a more than a 2x X on that sucker, it'd be good. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining us. Hey, listeners, thank you for listening. I'm glad we were able to get you a little extra episode because of the tiny drought. But yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hey.